Hey there! You might know Barak in Spanish. Our channel has over 400,000 subscribers. Well, this is the official English version. Same content, same passion. Now in your language. But we need your help to grow. Hit that subscribe button and join us on this new journey. Now, let's get back to the video. After the sales of Patrick Vieira in 2005, Ashley Cole in 2006, Thierry Henry in 2007, Emmanuel Adebayor in 2009, and Cesc Fabregas in 2011, Arsenal hit rock bottom in 2012. That year, Robin van Persie was the league's top scorer, won the Premier League Player of the Season award, and in the summer, he ran off to Manchester United, where the 29-year-old striker achieved the one thing he was missing. That was winning the Premier League. Antoine Griezmann took longer to leave for Barcelona than to return to Atletico de Madrid. First, he made a reality show to decide whether to leave or stay, and in the end, he announced he was staying with the Colchoneros. But the following year he decided he would, in fact, leave for Camp Nou. Barcelona paid his release clause, 120 million euros. Atletico threw a tantrum, cut ties, intimidated Barcelona, and forced them to pay an extra 15 million, a signing that made much more noise than impact. Griezmann returned to Atletico 2 years later, as if nothing had happened. In 2014, Manchester United was already desperate. Their situation was unacceptable. They couldn't go on like that. After more than 20 years of being used to winning the title, or at the very least, finishing second, Sir Alex Ferguson had left, and United finished 7th. The first move to fix things was signing one of Real Madrid's top players, Ángel Di María, who had just led the team to the long-awaited 10th European Cup. Di María was 26 and cost 75 million euros. The Argentine lasted just one season at Old Trafford, and 11 years later, United still hasn't recovered. In general, most major transfers in football history have been all bark and no bite. Ronaldinho, on the other hand, was all bite and then some, and that doesn't mean his arrival at Barcelona, went unnoticed. The Brazilian was 23 years old and had just won the World Cup the year before, but prying him away from Paris Saint-Germain, back when PSG was still a lightweight, was like taking candy from a baby. He cost just 32 million euros. Still, Ronaldinho was a panic buy by Joan Laporta, who had just taken over as Barça president, promising to sign David Beckham, and when Florentino Perez beat him on it, he turned to Ronaldinho as a plan B. What will be completely normal news today seemed like an April Fool's joke back in September 1st, 2008. That was the day Robinho became the first cornerstone of the new Manchester City project. At the time, the Brazilian was 24 years old and a key figure at Real Madrid. His transfer to City in 2008 will be the modern-day equivalent of Vinicius suddenly leaving for Brentford. Anyway, far from succeeding, Robinho's Premier League adventure lasted barely a year and a half. Enzo Fernández became the most expensive signing in Premier League history in January 2023. A record that Liverpool would later break with Florian Wirtz. The 121 million euros Chelsea paid for the brand new world champion was a complete overreach for a defensive midfielder, especially one Benfica had booked for just 10 million euros only 6 months earlier, when they signed him through to 2027. I mean, anybody will have believed that. Robert Lewandowski's departure to Bayern Munich deeply hurt the heart of Borussia Dortmund, but it was seen as inevitable, a foreign player who chose not to renew his contract with a team already on the decline. What happened with Mario Götze before that was far more scandalous, for several reasons. First, his age. Mario was only 20, and Germans, so rigid and principled, believe there's an age limit for being a traitor. Second, Mario had been in Dortmund's youth academy since he was 9. He knew exactly what he was doing when he chose to join Bayern. And third, he left at a historic moment, just when Borussia Dortmund had won 2 consecutive Bundesligas and reached the Champions League final. Dortmund had just as strong a squad as Bayern. But Götze chose money, and did so just weeks before that very final, where the two teams faced each other. So much drama, only for him to last 3 seasons in Munich before returning home, when he was already broken. Gonzalo Higuaín was 28 years old, the top scorer and idol at Napoli, when in 2016 Aurelio De Laurentiis set his price, 90 million euros, and incomprehensibly, Juventus happily rushed to pay it. The signing unleashed unprecedented outrage in southern Italy, where love for Napoli is so strong it can only be compared to the hatred for Juve. The Argentine striker lasted just 2 seasons at the Italian giant. In 2000, Juventus paid 9 million euros for Edwin van der Sar, making him the most expensive goalkeeper in history. Nobody wants to spend big money on a keeper. 2 years later, Juve completely lost it and paid Parma 53 million euros for Gianluigi Buffon, who was only 23 years at the time. An extraordinary figure, so much that 25 years later, only 2 goalkeepers have ever cost more: Alisson to Liverpool and Kepa to Chelsea, both in 2018. There was only one way to justify that kind of money. Buffon had to become the greatest goalkeeper of all time. And even if he didn't, I think he didn't fall far short. Even though history tends to only remember Gerd Müller and Franz Beckenbauer, at the time, Günther Netzer was the most popular player in Germany. Not only he was a great footballer, he was a cultural icon, with that flowing hair and rebellious nature. Netzer was such a big deal that Real Madrid used him as their answer to Johan Cruyff's arrival at Barcelona in 1973. It could sound like a joke today, but Netzer wasn't far behind Cruyff. He won German Footballer of the Year in both 72 and 73. He left Borussia Mönchengladbach to become the first German in Real Madrid's history, and he only lasted 3 years in the Spanish capital. Denílson de Oliveira played for Sao Paulo and, at 21 years old, was one of the standout players of the Brazilian national team that lost the 1998 World Cup final in France. Denílson was already tied to Juventus, but Barcelona offered more money to snatch him away at the last minute, and then, unexpectedly came the Real Betis bombshell, the final blockbuster move of the pre-modern football era, as they swooped in and signed him for 5 billion pesetas, the equivalent of 30 million euros at the time. Denílson signed a 10-year contract, and the whole thing turned out to be an absolute disaster. FC Barcelona won the Champions League in 2009 and again in 2011, without flashy signings, relying instead on a squad that was 70% homegrown talent. But the shift in their transfer strategy became clear in 2014. 1 year after signing Neymar, they went out and got Luis Suárez too. The Liverpool star arrived off of the back of a scandalous 2014 World Cup in Brazil, where, for the 3rd time in his career, he beat a rival defender. The Uruguayan was handed a 4-month suspension, and yet Barça still paid 82 million euros for him, equivalent to 107 million in today's market. Suárez played 6 years for Barça, scored 195 goals, provided 113 assists, won a Champions League, and, most importantly, because that was the biggest concern in 2014, beat 0 opponents. Barcelona had just won the Champions League in 2009 and didn't really need Zlatan Ibrahimovic, but Jose Guardiola was determined to get rid of Samuel Eto'o. So, he brought in the Sweet as his replacement. Zlatan was the star of Inter Milan and cost 69 million euros, which translates to around 100 million today. The idea was that his signing will counterbalance Real Madrid's capture of Cristiano Ronaldo that same year. But that never happened. Zlatan only lasted 1 season at Barça and was almost given away to Milan. Gareth Bale was the best footballer in the Premier League when, in 2013, Real Madrid made him the most expensive player in history. For the 4th and final time, Florentino Perez broke a transfer record he had already set. The Welshman was the first to break the 100 million euro barrier. He has spent 9 very up and down years in Madrid and won the Champions League 5 times. Despite being 35 years old, Lionel Messi's shocking move to Inter Miami caused a massive stir on July 15, 2023. At the time, it seemed impossible that the world champion will turn down the 1.4 billion euros offered to him for 4 seasons in Saudi Arabia. But after fulfilling a 2-year contract with Paris Saint-Germain, Messi chose the Major League Soccer, where he has now completed 2 years. Unlike Vinicius, Rodrigo, Hendrick or Estebao, Neymar spent many years in Brazil before inevitably ending up in Europe. He made his debut for Santos in 2009 and won the Copa Libertadores 2 years later. In 2011, Neymar's Santos was crushed in the Club World Cup final by Barcelona, a team that was already negotiating his transfer. But it didn't materialize until 2013, after Santos shut down its women's team and its legendary futsal department just to afford the star salary. Barcelona was very eager to show off that Neymar only cost 57 million euros. That was a total lie, because in the end, the total came out to 95 million. A year later, Barça president Sandro Rosell pleaded guilty to tax fraud in the Neymar deal. To keep him and his vice president, Josep María Bartomeu, out of jail, the club had to pay a 5 million euro fine. Rosell stepped down, but Bartomeu stayed and went on to confirm his catastrophic legacy. Neymar spent 4 years at Barça and won the last Champions League in the club's history. Roberto Baggio emerged in Italy's 3rd division with Vicenza, but made his Serie A debut with Fiorentina. 5 years later, in 1990, La Viola suffered one of the most painful defeats in their history, losing the UEFA Cup final, now known as the Europa League, against Juventus, the most hated club in Florence. The drama got even worse when, just 2 days later, Fiorentina sold their star player to Juventus for $14 million, making him the most expensive footballer in history at the time. Baggio spent 5 years with Juve and won the Ballon d'Or in 1993. Cristiano Ronaldo's exit from Real Madrid was like the boy who cried wolf. Even when the Portuguese forward hinted he was finally saying goodbye after winning the Champions League, nobody really believed it. But during the 2010 World Cup in Russia, the unthinkable happened. Real Madrid sold Cristiano Ronaldo to Juventus at a time when Serie A hadn't attracted players of that caliber in 2 decades. Cristiano was 33 years old and cost 117 million euros. He played 3 seasons in Italy. The excessive spending on the aging superstar dragged Juventus into a downward spiral from which they've never recovered. Never in football history had the same club broken the transfer record 2 years in a row, until 2001, when Florentino Perez paid Juventus 76 million euros to bring in Zinedine Zidane. The French World Cup winner was 29 years old. Paying that kind of money for a player Real Madrid will never be able to sell again to recover an even part of the investment seemed insane. But with that legendary goal in the Champions League final against Bayer Leverkusen in his first season in white, nobody ever mentioned the price tag again. Zidane played 5 seasons for Madrid, retired in 2006, and his record as the most expensive player in history lasted until 2009. Florentino Perez had shaken the transfer market so violently in 2001 that no footballer had ever remained the most expensive in history for so long. That record of longevity will be broken this summer by Neymar. Neymar's signing marked a before and after in football history. First, because the massive 100 million euro barrier had only just been surpassed when PSG paid 222 million euros for the Brazilian star from Barcelona. It wasn't just a record, it was completely absurd. And even 8 years later, no one has come even close. Never before had the all-time transfer record gone so long without being broken. 222 million euros in 2017 will be nearly 300 million today. The second reason why the transfer was so outrageous was that, for the first time, a smaller club like Paris Saint-Germain proved it had more financial power than anyone. And contrary to what many believed at the time, PSG could, in fact, lure any player they wanted to the weaker French league. Neymar played 6 years at Paris Saint-Germain and never won the Champions League, nor the Ballon d'Or he once seemed destined to lift.